Arrested, threatened with prosecution, their platforms banned. Are we entering a new era when it comes to accountability for tech giants? I'm Anelise Borges, and this is The Stream.
Freedom of speech does not exist in the West anymore. Pavel Durov, who is basically our Russian Zuckerberg, created Telegram, which is a messaging app similar to WhatsApp, and also Vkontakte, which is like Russian Facebook. But he wasn't arrested by Putin, he was arrested by France.
So Telegram has literally been compromised. Like, our information is no longer safe out there on Telegram.
X, formerly Twitter, has just been banned nationwide by Brazil's Supreme Court.
So I'm actually being arrested?
You're going to be arrested, okay?
Right.
Take that to the police station.
Right.
Okay, this is in relation to some comments that you've made on a Facebook page.
The thing about censorship is that, sure, for those who would advocate it, just remember, at some point, that will be turned on you.
The arrest of Telegram founder Pavel Durov in August in Paris may have come as a surprise, but it's part of a wider debate regarding the responsibility of social media companies for content shared on their platforms. Ex-CEO Elon Musk has been threatened with legal action in the UK over the platform's role in spreading disinformation during riots there this summer. And Meta has been in hot water in the past for its lack of moderation of illegal content and the spreading of malicious rumors. But how much responsibility do these companies bear? And where do we draw a line between moderation and censorship? To help us explore those questions and more, we have joining the stream today Nighat, the founder of Digital Rights Foundation, an NGO advocating for the internet to be a healthy and productive environment. Nuurrianti binti Jalli, a professor at Oklahoma State University specializing in online disinformation. Tech journalist and digital privacy advocate Naomi Brockwell, and Angela Minayo, a digital rights and policy lawyer at Article 19, a human rights organization defending freedom of expression and freedom of information worldwide. Thank you all so much for joining us here on the stream today. Naomi, Durov is now free on bail, but some of the charges brought against him are quite serious. They include failing to curb extremist and illegal content. What more do we know about the case at this stage? And also, why do authorities think that he should be liable for what's shared on his platform?
Well, one of the most striking things that I found in the charges against Durov were that 3 charges basically criminalized privacy. So 3 of the charges focused on him using cryptology tools that were unlicensed. And the last time I checked, we didn't need a license to have privacy online. But maybe France has changed their mind about that recently. It seems that a lot of governments around the world have changed their mind on that. So I think that we're getting to a really scary place where governments have normalized pervasive surveillance in our lives and made privacy seem like this strange relic of the past that's no longer normal. Privacy used to be normal, but now we use shameful language around it. Now we say, what have you got to hide? And now we say that, you know, the government has the right to invade everyone's privacy for national interests and security. But I think that it's the opposite. I think we make people more vulnerable when we collect all of their information. I think that we jeopardize all freedoms in a society when we eliminate the ability for people to have private online conversations. So I think that this is a very scary precedent where governments can arrest companies and founders of companies for basically using privacy tools and enabling free dialogue on their platforms. We don't want to head to a world where we no longer have any private spaces on the internet, because that's a scary world.
Very fair point. But I want to bring Nuurrianti on this, because Telegram has denied any wrongdoing. I wanted you to explain to us a little bit why the company has become slightly controversial, or at least a controversial space in recent years.
So for Telegram, we have issue with lack of moderation. So when it comes to Telegram, so that's the main issue, lack of moderation. We could see this through multiple examples, right? In Southeast Asia, say for example, in 2017, Telegram was banned in Indonesia for allowing extremists to use the platform to recruit people to join Jemaah Islamiyah. It's a Islamist group in the region. And then in the recent years, we have seen multiple other examples due to the lack of content moderation. And the hands-off approach by Durov kind of made this even worse, right? So there's a lot of questions on freedom of speech and also at the same time regulating problematic content on the platform. There should be balance between these two, right? We want freedom, but freedom of speech, that's for sure. We want to protect democracy, but also at the same time, due to lack of moderation, we also allow problematic content to be on the platform. And when asked and when questioned about these problems, founders such as Durov kind of okay, I'm providing the platform for people to use, but in order to look at this content, we want to make sure that we go very deep into investigating what we call it this issue, but oftentimes that led to nowhere.
I guess this is the big question with the internet, right? Where do we draw these lines? Angela, as we said, Durov is now out on bail, but this is obviously not over. What kind of precedent, as Naomi pointed out, what kind of precedent could this set for other platforms and their owners?
Thank you so much for that question. I think for a long time, we have always held that social media platforms are intermediaries, and therefore they were only held liable for content that maybe they were already told is illegal and they did not remove, but not for content that their users have posted. So there was this distinction between the platform owner and the users. We see now governments going after the platform owners, and this is a very dangerous precedent. It might also mean that platforms will be very much incentivized to remove content, and removing content might mean that sometimes they don't really follow the takedown procedures. They're not considering human rights of their users. With platforms like X already, the complaint handling mechanism is weak and does not really have the user's appeal process or the user's point of view before removing content. So we don't want platforms to feel pressured to bow down to government requests, because this might mean that we're going to see freedom of expression even more at risk and jeopardized. Also remember that companies might not necessarily have freedom of expression and human rights considerations prioritized, and therefore these political points of asking for compliance to platforms can have a very dangerous harm on freedom of expression.
In terms of the pressure on owners, among those lining up in support of Pavel Durov were Elon Musk, the owner of X, who posted a number of messages with the hashtag Free Pavel, but also this. He wrote, point of view, it's 2030 in Europe and you're being executed for liking a meme. I mean, Nighat, Elon Musk claims to be a free speech absolutist, all the while suing NGOs for their work of analyzing and studying content posted on X, but also complying with requests by governments to remove posts that criticize them in places like India and Turkey. Can I get you to comment on the character and on what Elon Musk represents today?
Yeah, no, I completely agree with what my other fellows already said, that, this arrest of Telegram's CEO set a very bad precedent. And I would say that it's a bad precedent for not only for democracies, but actually for the crumbling democracies and authoritarian regimes where we have been seeing such kind of decisions in the past, in previous years, but they never made to the international media. And I think it's kind of giving a validation to those governments that if we can do this, you can do this as well. So I would say it will be very, very challenging challenging for digital rights organizations and advocates who have been working for these freedoms for so long, especially in the countries and jurisdictions where rule of law is not really that strong or democracy is not strong. With regards to Musk, I would say that his actions, his tweets, I mean, it's now very, very clear to people around the world that what this platform is for at the moment. We are seeing the role of this platform in US elections. But I think one thing that many people around the world do not know, that the platform that has been overlooked by many authorities in the Western regimes and democracies has played really, really dangerous role in previous elections. I would say in India, in Pakistan, in Bangladesh, all the elections that we have faced in South Asia, this platform is thriving around the illegal, harmful content, but also in terms of there is no accountability and no one knows who to reach out to. But the bad actors are thriving and using this platform very much. I'm not sure what else to say about Musk, because he's kind of he's uncontrollable at the moment, as we all see through his tweets especially these days.
Yeah, he is indeed very involved in U.S. politics lately, isn't he? And sorry for putting you on the spot there, but I wanted your take on the influence that the platform has given him as well. Angela, X has now been banned in Brazil and in Pakistan and in other countries as well, but more recently in these two. And there are obviously different issues at stake here. But would you say they actually infringe freedom of expression, or are these places right in getting the platform to abide by local regulation?
I think that a ban is the most harsh measure that a platform that a government can use to control what they say they are trying to control: hate speech, misinformation and disinformation, and violent content. So there have been other approaches that are pro-human rights that still have the apps on. So this could be compliance reports from the social media companies, stronger content moderation policies, having a model that allows platforms to be more transparent so that the government can know how to support. For instance, being honest about the human rights challenges posed on their platforms and how they're mitigating them. So I would say that banning an entire platform is the harshest form of limiting free speech. And limiting free speech in international human rights law must be prescribed by law. It must be necessary and legitimate. So it must be necessary in terms of it's following a legitimate aim. And sometimes the aims that these governments are prescribing are not really legitimate. You cannot say you are banning an entire platform because content is annoying or the content is against a moral. This is a very amorphous standard to use when you're trying to limit free speech. We want stronger adherence to international human rights frameworks on freedom of expression so that we can have these open and public debates online. We know these public debates serve a purpose because we've seen entire uprisings because of digital activism. We've seen governments change, governments become transparent because of online space debates. So banning is too much of a harsh measure for me.
It's an extremely powerful tool indeed, an extremely powerful space, the online space, isn't it? And I loved what Naomi said at the start in terms of protecting the users, protecting all of us. But I want to bring something back from the start of the internet. It was 1996, ancient times. I know so many of our viewers were not even born. And there was something called the Declaration of Independence of Cyberspace by John Perry Barrow, a declaration that the internet was outside any country's borders and therefore off limits in terms of regulation. The bulk of it read, the governments of the industrial world, you wary giants of flesh and steel, I come from cyberspace, the new home of mind. On behalf of the future, I ask you of the past to leave us alone. You are not welcome among us. You have no sovereignty where we gather. Naomi, this feels incredibly accurate sometimes, but it's not always positive, isn't it? Nighat has been working for the internet to be a healthy and productive environment. We know that is not only that. How do we strike a good balance here in protecting people's private lives, private opinions, but also in protecting other people's feelings and keeping the space civil.
Yeah, it's interesting because I love that declaration, and it really points to that early hope of the internet, where it was seen as this democratizing tool. It could bring the entire world together. It was a place without, rules. We could have freedom of association, and what it's become is something quite different. It's become one of the most oppressive tools of totalitarian silencing and censorship that we've ever seen. And I think the problem comes down to the fact that countries can easily use terms like, well, hate speech and dangerous content and problematic content to basically silence voices. Now, in the early days, pre-internet, you had government control over media. So it was very easy to shape narratives, to create propaganda, to make sure society was towing the line. But along with the internet came this explosion, this Cambrian explosion of all kinds of different voices. And now the only tool, as we're seeing, is that if governments do not want these voices to be heard, they ban these platforms. I think it's very telling that countries are banning the platform because people have all kinds of different viewpoints. I don't think that the different viewpoints are the problem. I think that if these viewpoints come out, it's a reflection of underlying issues in the society, and these need to be addressed. And the best way to address them is through open dialogue, not through suppression of speech, because otherwise, when you wield this very blunt tool of censorship, it gives governments power to censor anything that they deem problematic. And it basically is a tool that is used by many governments around the world to further cement control and authoritarian oppression. So I think we have to be very careful excusing censorship when it's under the guise of, oh, it's against our regulations or against our, it incite violence and all of these things, because we've seen time and time again that these excuses are used just as much by authoritarian regimes that do not respect human rights. And so we should be very careful with such excuses.
Nuurrianti, your take, who should then try at least to organize things, to draw certain lines and again, to keep this space civil? Should it be national governments or no? I don't know. Should it be the UN? Should there be an international type of regulation that kind of applies to the world of the internet?
I mean, the question of who should regulate social media platform is very contentious and complex issue. There are arguments, right? Both national and international approaches. Each, they have like own strengths. So national regulation for sure can help understand, provide us with specific cultural nuances and legal context issues involving like local community. On the other hand, we also have international regulation that can provide more consistent approach across borders. So I feel like, the best way for now would be a hybrid approach, right, between international and international standard, and also at the same time complemented by national regulations. So like, say, for example, we have in the EU, right, Digital Services Act, that provide a good example how like multiple countries can come together with some sort of like regulation that can look at this issue, information issue across social media and make social media more accountable. So for other countries, smaller countries, if they stand alone to challenge what we call it social media platforms, it would not have as much input, what we call it impact. It has to be some sort of coalition, and also at the same time, there should be third-party oversight to look at all these demands from governments to kind of to balance, to keep in check, like, hey, is this like a real issue, or is it like you're using this law to kind of as a part of your political strategy to silence critics, to kind of like stop people from criticizing you. So that's like something that we have to ponder and like really think through.
Nighat, you said something very powerful when we spoke to you before the show. You said that the power should lie with users, and I find that fantastic. You're also part of an initiative that seems very interesting, Meta's Oversight Board, which is one way of pulling the curtains and showing users what content is being moderated, how it's being moderated. Can you talk to us about the board, how the board works, but also if you think that it could be applied to other platforms as well?
Yeah, I mean, I think my fellow panelists already mentioned about independent oversight board. I think it's an ecosystem that we really need to see how we can hold these platforms accountable, not only regulations, international human rights framework, but also need to see how independent oversight boards can play their role. So for instance, Meta's oversight board, which has been working for 4 years now, basically plays the role in enforcing content moderation policies across Meta's platforms, which is Facebook and Instagram. And what we do is basically independently review appeals and decide cases on content moderation policies of Meta, where especially those cases where the decision by Meta is contested by the users. And we provide independent judgments on whether Meta's decisions are in line with its own policies and international human rights framework or not. And our decisions are binding on them. And I think, and maybe we have done really made really good decisions, but maybe there along the lines, we have also learned a lot in terms of the transparency of the platform and holding the platform accountable. And our decisions are, and our progress is basically transparent towards the users. I think it sets a good precedent. And I feel it's not the only solution. It can be part of several solutions that many has spoken in this conversation, that we need all these bodies. We need very active civil society as well, for instance, who can hold platforms accountable, but also governments accountable. We do not want to give power to any one CEO or one government or one Western government to set the stage for the entire world, including global majority countries. So I think we really need to see all these models, the models that are working, but also, like empower civil society a lot, because I feel that the role of civil society is decreasing, and all these platforms and governments are trying to decide about the future of the users without following the multi-stakeholder approach, which I feel is so important to keep in mind.
That is a very valid point. Angela, how do you make sure users are part of this conversation going forward, especially persecuted minorities for whom privacy might be a matter of life and death?
Before I answer your question, I just want to reiterate that everyday platforms are deciding which content stays up and which content is removed from their platforms. So they are the judge, jury. Sometimes there's no appeal process whatsoever. We want users to be in the driving seats, and I agree completely with Nighat that users are almost at the periphery of the content moderation policies, of the terms and conditions of use for these platforms. And therefore, we want more engagement and meaningful engagement with the local communities that they serve. This engagement will look at, for instance, minority issues, marginalized issues, women, especially in the global south, because we know our voices are not being heard. We know that sometimes feminist organizations' accounts are actually banned. Human rights, civil society organizations' accounts are banned sometimes. And you can see how this content moderation, whether it's automated or human assisted, can end up in biased decisions. And therefore, we cannot just say as long as a platform is moderating content, then it's good. We need to look at the quality of the content moderation.
Indeed. Naomi, one final thought here, if you will. How do you see this going forward? Do you see the civil society, these users, rising up and claiming more privacy, more freedom, and also holding all these in power accountable?
Well, I really like what's going on with community notes on X. I think that's a great middle ground. Everyone's talking about independent review boards and all these other things, but in those cases, you still have these arbiters of truth. You still have organizations that can be corrupted and coerced and manipulated in certain ways to still want to suppress certain content over others. But when you have community notes, let's have that open discourse. If someone writes a really bad comment, if someone puts up misinformation, then allow the community to respond and say, hey, this is not true. Here are my facts. I think that's been one of the most positive outcomes that I've seen from X in the recent years, because it just gets these conversations going. And instead of suppressing ideas, we can actually call out bad ideas ideas for what they are, and we can provide counterpoints. I think that's the most powerful thing that we can do in the face of all this, hate speech or misinformation and all the things that governments claim to be about. If they really wanted to conquer this, the best way to conquer bad ideas is with better ideas, not by suppressing ideas. So I would love to see more of that and less centrally controlled decision-making.
And that is a very good idea. Naomi, thank you so much. Nighat, Nuurrianti, and Angela as well for joining us and for being part of the stream today. And thank you all for tuning in. Do stay in touch with us on social media. Use the hashtag or the handle AJStream, and we will look into your ideas. Take care, and I'll see you soon.